So what is emotional manipulation? We hear these terms all the time lately. You're gaslighting me, you're love bombing me. And these are real, true experiences of manipulation and emotional abuse and wounding. And so I thought we'd talk about some obvious and less obvious ways we can be victims of emotional manipulation on someone's behalf. Now, emotional manipulation is really a form of psychological manipulation that's really about control at the center. And there's a way of distorting reality or exploiting someone's feelings, emotions, needs, desires with the intention to have control, to have power, to have privilege at the expense of the person they are doing this behavior or this response toward. And it's important to know, though, that just because you don't see things the same way as someone, because you're feeling that you're trying to help someone maybe change their mind about something, there are varying degrees of healthy sort of psychological influence or attempts to influence. Like most of us are trying to get our way eventually or in some ways, even if we don't mean to as human beings. There's just a part of us that is wired to obviously focus on our own needs. But where it starts to get difficult around emotional manipulation is the intent. Like, what is the bottom line? What does the person want out of this? What do they have to gain at my expense as a potential victim of emotional manipulation? And why do people do this? Now, people might be doing it because in their childhood, that was the language of the home, that's just what they saw. Let's say if you had one or two narcissistic or immature, more selfish kind of parents, that might have been the way you saw that things got handled. That is how you got your needs met. It could have been the opposite, that because of what happened in childhood, you never really learned or were taught how to self-advocate or respectfully engage. And as a result of your trauma and your experiences, you've learned to sort of, respond in ways that try to get your needs met. And maybe you're not fully aware that what you're doing may fall under the category of manipulation. So it's also important to look at what's the overarching dynamic here, because gaslighting is really about trying to make you doubt or question your reality. So if I say, I don't agree with you how that happened, that's not gaslighting. Gaslighting is me knowing what the thing was and intentionally trying to deny your reality or distort it or create doubt in your mind. So that is really important to understand. And something like love bombing is really about showering somebody, trying to sort of consume them and get them to come to you in a way that makes them love you, care for you, choose you, with the goal of that being it. It's not about, I just want to show you love. There is an intent to it. I'm going to make you fall in love with me. I'm going to make you see me as worthy or whatever it is. So of course things like, creating guilt, giving someone a guilt trip, being critical, isolating somebody, humiliating them, threatening them, blaming them, accusing them, being unfaithful, all of those can have significant elements of emotional manipulation. But where it starts to get difficult is around intentional ways of just shifting things. So having a situation where, for whatever reason, you have the advantage in terms of how you share what you want, what the outcome might be. You're already kind of loaded with power and you go into it acting like you don't, but at the end of the day, let's say it's a boss, right? A boss has an inherent power dynamic built in, that even if it feels like they're offering or negotiating with you, they're still your boss. So that there's no equality there in terms of power. You might have someone who asks you to give your answer first to sort of then decide what they want to do. That can be very manipulative. Oh, you go first, you answer, and then I'll decide how to respond. It can be something like buying a car, for example, right? Where it's they want you to say your number first. And there are places where this is a common tactic in business or other relationships, but inherently there's a power differential and an intent to manipulate. Somebody can manipulate the facts and modify what seems to be the truth, which we see all of the time. It's very confusing sometimes, especially when you have different sources. It could be, they might manipulate the facts through just blatantly lying, through making excuses, through understating what's really going on. Or they might overwhelm you with too much information, too many facts, too many statistics. It's like a knowledge bomb in a way that you feel disoriented and unsure and like, okay, I'll agree to that, but you don't really know what you're agreeing to. It can definitely be things like overwhelming you, once again, with like, oh, it has to be this way and that way, and it's this step and that step and that step, and to the point where once again you give up. It might be someone raising their voice and using a very dangerous kind of tone with you, or unsafe tone. It could be what they call negative surprises, where they sort of trying to get you off balance by last minute information that's not going to benefit you. So you think that you understand the way things are going, and at the last minute something changes, but you have a short window to make a decision, and so you panic and make whatever decision, or you feel triggered. Also not giving you enough time, so kind of going back to the window, making it almost impossibly small and pressuring you to make a decision through a small window of time. You could use critical remarks and humor and ways of just sort of poking at somebody to sort of shame them into doing what you want. So they're trying to make you feel small, make you feel stupid, so that you will relent and give them what they want. It could come from a person being very critical and judgmental of you, and so you feel like you always want to be the good child, the good person, and as a result, often of your childhood, you're more set up to agree to things like that. So that kind of gets you like off balance through, ridiculing you, dismissing your needs, marginalizing what you want, and you're just like, okay, I want to be the good one, so I'll just give in to this. We also know for sure things like the silent treatment, stonewalling, not talking to somebody specifically with the intent of making them feel some kind of way to get what you want. So you deliberately don't respond to calls and texts or emails or inquiries, and you're trying to get them to see how upset you are so they'll give in. Pretending like you don't understand what someone's talking about, acting like you're dumb or ignorant, like, oh, I don't really get that. But there's an intent, once again. Sort of trying to get people to feel guilty. So you actively show up trying to set a stage of feeling guilt, and doing things like intentionally victimizing somebody. And so you're basically exaggerating things. You are making it worse to make them feel like you're the victim. Oh, poor me. You're basically, oh, poor meing them. And they feel so bad for you, they give in, right? You create this victimness around yourself. So those are often really common ways we can emotionally manipulate. And lastly, I will say that somebody sharing their emotions with you is not necessarily being manipulative. I think it can feel that way. Oh, you're crying now and I can't deal with your crying, so I'm going to give in. Learning to tolerate other people's emotions is a huge part of engaging in relationships without manipulation. You have to make this space. So you try to honor what you're seeing and feeling. You provide, boundaries for yourself, or you set and hold boundaries. You look at what your non-negotiables are. You try to sit with yourself before you make a decision. I think pausing is so huge if you don't know what to do. And that way you can check in with yourself and decide, what do I want to do? Maybe you need to work on your communication skills. How do you self-advocate? How do you speak up for yourself? How do you share boundaries and needs? And that can be really difficult, especially if you were wired not to do that. And then deciding that you're not responsible for other people's emotions. All you can do is show up in authentic ways that honor who you are, while also holding yourself accountable, but also holding them accountable. Is this okay? Is this not okay? And giving yourself the space to say, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to respond to these things, these tactics, like time manipulation or whatever, or flooding with facts. I need to get back to you. Let me think about it. And then spending the time to pause and reflect on what you want to, do. And knowing that if a person is, and you know very well they are manipulative, then you're kind of walking into the lion's den every time you deal with them. And you want to have your armor on and think about before you see them. How do I want to respond? Like, I like to think of imagery of people that I like love or respect, or it could be a character or an idol or a word. You want to set your boundaries, recognize that they might have this victimness or these demands or these intents, but really questioning, like, what is the intent here? What do they get out of me saying yes? What does my response give to them can sometimes be really helpful in deciding if it is emotional manipulation or not. So I hope this was helpful. I do know that many of us who have these difficult childhoods can be very susceptible to these dynamics because they can feel so hidden and camouflaged, and then later we're like, oh, that didn't feel very good. but we didn't even know it was happening, especially if that was the language in our homes. So please feel free to add any more that you think I forgot. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Stay safe.